Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Coffee Review. Hope you had a lovely Memorial Day. Today is May 28th. It's the last week of May. It's starting to feel like summer already. It's looking really good. Hope things are going well for you out there, Michael. How are they going?
They're going good, except for we're starting to heat up. I was looking just yesterday because I was worried about plants outside, and it's going to be consecutively 100 degrees now. So we are at that mark of summer, I guess. So we are officially in the hottest times, but excited for today. We're going to be talking about 3D PDFs and what we can utilize with them. And we're going to actually, as we always do, in terms of transparency and honesty, talk about other solutions in terms of what way can we view some type of Revit enabled model instead of just a 3D PDF. What else is out there, and what can you get out of compare contrast basically from the differences of them? So
Right. And this came from, we've been getting a lot more requests for a Revit viewer, right? Where they don't have a full license of Revit. They don't want to get a trial. They just need to see the information. But that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to use the software. And I know for myself, if I get into Revit, the chances of me breaking stuff are pretty high. So I want to be able to take a look at something, and we're saying Revit here, but there are other uses for this, IFC files and things from Navisworks. Like, you can do a whole lot with it, but the main reason that we're talking about Revit is because there's a Bluebeam plugin that's going to make this process easier. So that's how we're going to tie the room together. So
it
if you're in a
also
spot, go ahead.
in Navisworks, right?
Yeah. If it, the It appears in Navisworks, it appears in Revit. There is a plugin in AutoCAD and Civil 3D, but it doesn't do the 3D PDF thing. But Revit's not cheap, and it'd be ridiculous to buy a license for it just to be a viewer, right? So we're going to talk about how to view Revit files, how to interact with Revit files, and we're starting in Bluebeam Review because that's what we do, right? So um, what are we talking about here? I'm going to share one with you. Speaking of Navisworks, here's one that I pulled out of Navisworks, right? So here is a Navisworks Revit Civil 3D model all combined, right?
Wow.
And this is just a PDF file. This PDF file is like not even 3 megs, not even 2 megs. It's tiny, right? This whole model in Revit would be way too big to email, right? It'd be a big, big thing that you'd have to put together. I mean, it would be a nightmare to sort of send this out to the team to take a look at, right? Because you're not sure that everybody can see it the same way accordingly, right? So this is a PDF file. It's pretty darn smooth on my end. Streaming might make things a little weirder, but
It looks
you,
fine on me.
you can take a look at things. You can go inside the building. Whoa, see all the little chairs, and we're up in the rafters. Like, this is stuff that you're going to see in a more 3D oriented program, but this is just a PDF. It's wild. Now, can you do measurements in here? I'm just going to get that out of the way. No, you cannot. Right? So if I wanted to know the distance of this opening here, I'm limited. I do not have measurement tools available to me. I mean, they're there, but I can't measure because there's no function,
There's like no
right?
calibration, right? If I remember correctly.
Right. But I can leave a comment, right? I can make comments in here. I can do some other things, and we'll get to that in just a minute, right? So one of my favorite things to show off here is the ability to do sections, right? So if I needed to take a look at my floor plan or do whatever else, I have this plane that I can move. If you grip it just right, there we go. You can move it up and down and actually section the building or the structure that you're looking at, right? So if I want to go back, I have that floor plan on the left. There we go. Something like that. I can do that, right? And there's a bunch of other things that we can do in here, and we'll dive more. Hey, look, there's people down here. There's more things that we'll be able to do with this model accordingly. But again, this is a PDF. And I think when it comes to a viewer, myself not being a Revit user, if I needed to get in there and see what's going on. I can do a lot with this, and I feel confident that I'm not going to screw anything up, right? So, as I mentioned, this came from Navisworks. It's one of the sample files in Navisworks, and I just went up and created it with a 3D PDF, which is going to be the same workflow, essentially, that you're going to see Michael demonstrate here in a minute when he pulls up Revit and does that. So, without further ado, I'll stop sharing and we'll do that.
Yeah, perfect. So with that, basically, if you want to go through and use the 3D PDF capabilities, not from Navisworks, but from a Revit standpoint, basically you can open up your Revit environment, picking just whichever, version you want to go through and utilize. I typically just go through and we'll just do file new from our pre-existing projects from out of the box. Well, actually, file open.
So while you're opening that, I'm going to address some of the questions in the chat.
Okay.
Can you create 3D PDFs from AgTech or TBC, Trimble Business Center? Not that I'm aware of. I don't know anything about AgTech, but I know TBC has a lot of functionality in it, but I haven't heard anything about those 3D PDFs. Now, their file format is it's not super locked down. So it's potential that we could open it up in Navisworks and then create one from there. And that's going to be my answer for a lot of things, right? Since Navisworks has so many file compatibility platforms built into it, DGN, DWG, Revit models, it can open up a whole bunch of things. So if you can open up a TBC file in Navisworks or an AgTech file in Navisworks, then your chances of being able to generate a 3D PDF are pretty high. And I'm going to add that on there, Sheldon. That's how I would do a Civil 3D one as well. Just open up the Civil 3D drawing in Navisworks and then do the 3D PDF from there. The PDF functionality in Civil 3D does not have the 3D component to it for some reason, right? Mainly because we're not dealing with the views, right? In Civil 3D, if we're dealing with a 3D view, it's usually an object view or some other like skewed plane. We don't have the native 3D views that Revit and Navisworks have. So I'm guessing that's why it's more of a limitation of Civil 3D than it is a limitation of Bluebeam Review's plugin.
So with that, you can go through, and when you're wanting to create a 3D PDF, you have your add-ins and you have Bluebeam. So from here, you have the option to immediately create a 3D PDF. Now, there are some different standards. So a 3D PDF is great standalone, but if you want to go through it, add it into a page. So let's say you have a general note sheet or something like that, or some type of cover sheet, and you wanted to have a floatable, I guess, quote unquote, model. You do have that option to go through and utilize that within the U3D to drop it onto a page or an IFC export of that model. And that's simply when you have a sheet open again. So I'll just go to here. If I wanted to place something up here, top left, or some open area, you can go to edit, you can go to PDF content, and you can do the add. This is buried. It always frustrates me that this is so far like down in the weeds where just to find this tool in terms of like PDF content, because this is typically like editing. It's not typically like adding something, right?
Right.
So I think this should be moved out on its own. But anyways, you can add the content, but from here you just say, hey, I'm going to add some type of viewing into here. And basically it wants you to open up a 3D file, and it'd be an IFC or some sort of that type of file, U3D or IFC. And basically it points to that file location and it drops and adds it into your PDF as a 3D viewer, I guess you would say. But I just don't have any on this computer, only on my old ones. But essentially what you could do is you could either print that U3D or you can export as an IFC, whichever one you want to. For this example, we're just going to go through and create a 3D PDF directly from within Revit here. So I'm going to save this to my desktop. It's telling me how many elements are in this specific file. Now, I always just remind people when it's saying loading, don't click anything, especially if it has a lot of content in it, because it will lock down review just because it's rendering all of that metadata. So when you're in review, you also have the option, and I was going to ask you that, Jason, to see what the 3D model tree from Navisworks looks like. If it's an IFC, is it pulling data or not? And does that just depend of where it's coming from? I don't know. But basically what you can come in here and do is you can select an element. That's the one thing that's great about the markups list. There is a specific markups list for your 3D PDF information. So from here,
funny thing, side note, rabbit hole. I did open up the 3D model tree, and this file that I showed, the 3D PDF from Navisworks. So it comes with Navisworks, and one of the layers in here, so all the metadata did come over, and one of the layers is ArchiCAD data. So ArchiCAD being a fierce competitor to Revit, I thought it was funny that they included that.
Yeah, I saw you laughing. I was like, what?
Yeah, like, why would
I say something?
Why would Autodesk put that out there?
Yeah.
And not break it first and then put it up there. That'd be more funny. But anyway.
So it's actually in their sample files.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't look. You know them.
No comment.
So from here, you can go look at your elements. So basically, when you select an element, it will populate it in terms of a selection. The one thing I do like about this, though, is that it starts to hide information, like in terms of it's buried. So if you select an element from the model tree, let's say it's inside a building, it will start to get you in a view that you can actually figure out where that information is. So it starts to kind of make a transparency automatically for you. But again, you have all this elemental data from your Revit environment. So you have the name, of course, the ID that it has with it. You can go over here and look at the export to. You can see the type ID, type elements as I keep scrolling over, family type. You have the phase created on the volume, the length. I think there were some additional ones here. So you can say like columns. So here's all of the existing ones. You can manage columns. There's some more that is just a lot. So I think it brings over pretty much everything you need. You just have to decide what you want to show. You just can't do like custom columns. So it's just the metadata that comes with your specific 3D model tree from your parameters that you've added. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's see what else the Shay says. Show all parts. I guess that's just like filtering. Export to CSV right here. So if you wanted to export it to CSV, that's a little bit hidden compared to the other viewer. I guess that's just probably because they dropped this in here, so you can have the viewer down here versus up here when you're in the 3D model tree, the navigator. So
about all that data, David asked the question, not being a Revit user, it appears that you need to include a lot of information as you create the family elements in the model. Is that correct? So a lot of these column data, is that stuff that you're inputting as you're creating like that column that's highlighted now, or is that stuff that populates automatically from Revit?
Majority of the information populates automatically from the original creation of these families. So let's say if you were creating a generic family out of the box, I mean, if you were creating a family, the information won't be there, right? But majority of your information, let's say from a structural element or even from a typical door from out of the box, I mean, you're going to add material values that you want specifically for that door or window. I mean, I guess what vein are we going to go into? I'll just stay structural. You can all point me to some other one if you want. Like typical column sizes, typical pier sizes. Well, they don't really have a label of piers. I won't get into that in terms of an Autodesk helping us. But trusses, right? Typical how trusses, or let's just say joists and things of that nature, has a lot of this information already in there in terms of what is typical standards. So
yeah, there's all sorts of stuff in there that I don't even know what that means. That's crazy.
I mean, like you do have to add rebar cover. So if you're modeling concrete or something like that, you know, you're modeling your slab on grade or something, you do have to add rebar. So you would have to add that, what your cover face is and all of that information if you wanted to automatically place rebar in a specific area. There's some things you have to add, but the majority of the information's there. Now, if you're making some type of custom family that's not from out of the box or from somewhere, yeah, you have to add information.
So on that note, David had the comment, it's similar to the custom markup tools for takeoff and review. You get out of it what you put out into it, and that's 100% correct. Anything that you're doing in CAD anything you're doing in Revit, anything that you're doing in that digital design workspace, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it, right? If your layers are named appropriately, your families are named appropriately, we're seeing more and more of scenarios like we're describing today where these softwares are leaving their native home, right? I'm dealing with a Revit model, but here now it's a PDF. What can I still do with it? Or I'm in Revit, or I'm taking a Revit model or an ArchiCAD model and bringing it into Navisworks. What sort of data can I get out of it, right? So the more time you spend, the better off you're going to be. Now, on that note, as you put, David, you're using something created by others and you want them to do all the work too. So like be the change you want to see in the world type of thing, right? If we can standardize this as technicians, drafters, designers, modelers ourselves, the better off that we can make this industry, right? On that note, another segue, next week is June 4th, and we've got Doug put down on the calendar to dive more into the external data from Revit or from Revu for when it comes to estimating, right? So what we're talking about putting more into it now to get more out of it later, you're going to see a lot of that next week as well.
Yeah, and going back to just information, I think it comes down to a lot of us understanding like where the industry is going and essentially what do you want to do with your data, and where we want to go as an industry. But again, coming back full circle of how much you put into it is how much you're going to get out of it. But then also holistically looking at like what is the intent to do with all of this data at the end of the day. I think in a perfect world, you would go from inception to facility maintenance, right? Like in terms of SD all the way to handover to FM solution, hopefully for clients. Now, from a residential perspective, that may be a little bit different. But again, being aware of that from more of a commercial standpoint, I mean, this would be huge for a facility like a hospital or something like that, right? Healthcare in terms of maintenance of there. You can think of semiconductor plants. That would be another huge iteration for facility maintenance from that perspective. I mean, there's a lot that goes into understanding what we can get out of it. But again, it comes down to what are we putting into it and the time that it takes to put that information into it as well. So like, what is the outcome? Because I think that's also a misconception as well. Well, you can just model and put the information in there. But at the end of the day, that takes time, right? And that time is valued at $1 amount everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So this is what you get from here. Now, if you wanted to quickly do an IFC export, you can. Basically, you just have some options. I would probably just create it from one simple one versus actually going through and actually having the full model, because when you're going through an IFC export, it's going to print out the entire thing. So that's my little tidbit. What were we going to do next, Jason?
So there's a couple things in Revu when it comes to 3D PDFs that we haven't really played with before, and that's the lighting and the colors.
Yep.
Right. So you can use this as a very rudimentary rendering platform, right? If you wanted to add some different appearances to the 3D PDF, you have the ability to not only just change colors of the various objects and elements in the file, but you can also change the lighting, which is kind of neat.
Yeah. I don't know why I do some of these, but CAD optimize.
CAD optimized. Oh boy.
Headlamp. Okay. And then you have your render modes, so transparent, solid outline, illustrated,
Shaded illustration to that one.
Shaded illustration.
That's kind of cool.
Then you have bounding box. You have transparent bounding box. Wireframe. That's a little bit harder to see. It's probably because I have like this. If I change it back to none, no, white. doesn't really help.
But you
That'd
could do
be
some pretty
too
clever
much.
exhibits with this too, right? If
Yeah.
you had this inserted as a viewport, where you had
Shaded
your 3D
wireframes.
content on a title block and you added some notes and some annotation to it, you could do a lot with there without needing, a more robust solution.
Yeah, and you would just ask for an IFC export if you're not utilizing this solution of Revit or something like that. But it'd be a way to give some volume to like a PDF perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Are those openings? Maybe they are. Sorry, so those are vertices, shaded vertices. So yeah, cool. So that was the graphics. You also have switch perspective. Great, thank you. You can have spin, rotate, pan, camera, select. You have the option to manage your view. So if you wanted to create a new view, so you can click it basically, and it goes to a preset settings. You just pick where you want something, and then you can go to here. Or is it this button? No, it's default view, manage views. And then you could just add a new view, what my current view is. And this will be what either it opens up to as default view, or you're saving the view of what it is current state so that you can just click it. Basically, again, going front, then going back to new view, right? You're just saving these views for easy access of maybe like showing an example to a client or something like that of viewing it, right?
Yeah, because that's going to make it a lot easier for them too. What I'd be curious of is if you save the 3D PDF, does it remember your visualization settings? Right? That way you're on the same page, no pun intended, with someone if you're collaborating with them. Ooh, pretty. And there was another question about, does this work with um, sessions
It
in the
didn't look
studio?
like it saved it. Primary color.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, we'll have to play with that some more.
Or was it because it was in my new view? Nope. Yeah, didn't. Does it what? What was the question?
Do these work in studio?
Yep. Yes, they do. They're a .pdf extension. So 2D and 3D PDFs are the only things that work in a studio session.
Yep. Now, another question that was in the chat, then I typed a response instead of saying it. So, can you do this in all three versions of Review? So you can view in all three versions, basics, core, and complete. In order to mark up and do some manipulations, you need to have core or complete.
Are you asking me? I thought you were looking it up.
Okay, yeah. Statement.
Yeah. So with that, maybe I do a comparison with ACC now, we're thinking, or does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, let's pull up ACC and do that, right? So another option for a Revit viewer platform or hey, I want to collaborate on a file, right? Because we've shown you how to collaborate with Review. We just talked about Studio, being able to do markups and doing all that other stuff. You'll be able to do that with these 3D PDFs through that. But what if you don't have that? What if you have Autodesk Construction Cloud, or ACC as we always call it? How does that compare? So we're going to jump in there as we go. So while Michael has that loaded up, there's some conversation in the chat here about, Pennsylvania DOT going paperless, right? So not only is PennDOT going paperless or trying to go paperless, I believe they're also in that transition from a Bentley workflow to an Autodesk workflow, right? So there's big changes for those folks who work up in that area or work on those projects. But on these paperless projects, the contractor is going to get provided a model, right? So not necessarily a set of plans, a model. Now I've heard of other projects up in the New York area where the contractors are actually building off the model as well. It's insane, right? We're seeing more architects, more engineers work on construction teams because they are the ones interpreting, there's a word there, interpreting the model to get it to be built. So I think that's where tinfoil hat, crystal ball things are going in 10 or 15 years, but some of these more, innovative states like Pennsylvania are really jumping in early, and it's pretty wild.
Yeah, to kind of like look back holistically on the industry as a whole, I feel like a lot of the automation is going to come from what mundane tasks we do, right? So like mundane tasks from laying sheet layouts, dimensioning, that kind of thing will be more automated. And of course, Autodesk Infinite Wisdom will probably call it AI, but it's more automated from information input already. And that just comes down to us from an industry standpoint, putting more quality of data into your information, because I feel like a lot of it's going to live in a platform like this or in a platform like your phone with with Bluebeam Cloud, those types of things of iterations of you're just turning the next key for the next door from an existing solution in one platform integrated with many platforms, right? So that's kind of my tinfoil hat of where we'll be. And it just comes down to quality. We need to get there as from an industry standpoint, own up to our work, what we're putting into our work. That way, then from a GC standpoint, they can turn that next key immediately and start building off of what is that and what's existing. Does that make sense? That's kind of like my thought. Do you agree?
I agree. So as you're doing that, I'm gonna do some testing in the background here. There was a question: do 3D PDFs work in the new Bluebeam Cloud for web? And I thought we tested it a long time ago, but I don't think we.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't think we did on the new sessions.
I have one on this one, so I'll sign in. But they don't work on your phone, so just be aware of that. 3D PDFs aren't phone activated.
Yeah, but I don't remember if they worked here. So
yeah, we'll see. Because I have one in here. They're here. Free to click on it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just the markup.
You see the markups, but you do not see the 3D PDF.
Yeah, that's the 3D PDF. This one is. So it's whatever markup like saved on that page,
Yeah. That would make sense because that's more of that workflow. So good question. But yeah, that does not appear to function yet. But man, that would be really hard to pull off. So, okay.
Yeah, because I don't know how, because even the viewer is different in here than it is on your desktop application in terms of like scrolling in the single page versus multiple pages. Scrolling pages versus continuous page, right? No, that's the same thing. Single page versus continuous page. Yeah, right. Confused myself. I haven't had enough coffee. That's why Jason keeps taking over, because he's amazing, saving me.
My coffee's strong this morning, so
yeah, mine's a little weak.
That does not bode well for my afternoon. I will be asleep. So sorry if you have a meeting with me later. So there's some good chat in the good conversation in the chat talking about the future of things we're just going about. So like more model driven construction instead of the whole CD construction document roll a blueprint thing. David's talking about this, and I think this is potentially possible. Take your bid documents, upload them right to the GPS machine control, right? More and more tractors. If you're driving by a construction site, you see a little weird device hanging off of it. More of them are GPS enabled. Now, obviously, they're not super accurate, right? You're not going to do some fine grading with that, but you can do quite a lot. So, how much can we remove all those steps in between there? And there's some other talks about, by the time it gets to construction, so many changes are going to happen because of bad models, and it really bogs down the constructability. So, there's going to be a lot of, I won't even say innovation, but I'll say refinement, because I think we have a good idea of where we want to go or where the industry is going, but there's a lot of moving pieces there. And there's definitely some things that will need to be figured out before everybody just goes full bore with this.
Yeah, I feel like I had the same conversation. I was out on a visiting client site last week, and we had this same conversation. And it just comes down to us owning information and how we transmit that and what it will be and what it could be. We just had to be aware that technology is from our industry, right? I remember being in school and them and being told that it takes 10 years for us to adopt new technologies, right? With that being said, technology is evolving in 6 months now to a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So think
And
about that time track of technology evolving from a technology standpoint, and it's finally reaching our industry and evolving that quickly, because it's always, I mean, it's not always been, but it's like our phones, right? Evolving quickly every year,
mhm.
every year, every year. Um, to now our industry has technology coming out every 6 months or a year, something very impactful. And it's just us as an industry sifting through and being willing to adopt new things more readily. Like people that are still in AutoCAD and not in some design system. It's just, I think we just need to turn a corner.
Yeah. And it certainly could be that. There's been so much, and Doug, that you hit that right on the
Yeah.
head. Ever since COVID came around, everybody's like, uh-oh, we might actually have to do stuff differently now. It wasn't just a pie in the sky, dreamy, futuristic idea of how construction is going to work, but it's like, crap, we still need to get things done. What do we do? And I think, going back to what I mentioned earlier about be the change, um, these models, and I will say this maybe admittedly, sometimes people model in Revit or Civil 3D or whatever modeling software, and it might not be perfect, but it looks good on the plan. Right? Know what I'm saying? So if you send the plan out, the plan
I think
works, but the
everyone knows
actual
what you're
model,
saying.
maybe it's not so good. So what's going to happen is if we skip the whole plan part,
Yep.
and we got to send out the model, it's going to cause a little bit of an awakening of like, uh-oh, we can't just
Disruption.
fake it and cover it in Bondo and paint it over it anymore. We actually have to do the work. So I think that's where we as users have to be a little bit more of, what's going to happen if somebody opens up this model in 3 years to build from it, right?
It'll be fine.
Fine, it's fine. Yeah.
With that, what can we do in ACC? So ACC, you are able to go through and with a docs license. So we were talking about viewers and free things in that nature. So there is a free viewer, right? A Revit viewers, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But if you have an AEC collection, you have access to docs. So you can get invited to a project. And within docs, you do have access to selecting, clicking a model. So that's our comparison, I guess you would say, from a free portion. But it's kind of like you already paid for it. So I don't know if it's necessarily free like the viewer, but we'll talk about what you can do with the portion of docs within ACC, so Autodesk Construction Cloud. Again, remember, for those folks that are listening in, because I think I need to always say this until it's finally done, but it went BIM 360 team, A360, BIM 360, and then ACC. Think of ACC as the platform, so the overall platform itself. And in that platform, there's these things called modules like docs. Docs is kind of like, if you want to think holistically, a file storage. I'm not going to use the other word because everyone's just going to say it's not the exact same as the other word because there's other things in docs that you can utilize. It's a file storage repository meant to be one centralized location of file storage for a project, right? You can do things like this is new specifications, but you can do review, transmittals, issues, reports, members, and there's this thing called Bridge, which I was working over the weekend yesterday to help out a team member. So there's other things. Now within the files, you can go through, you can select the file location. So however the team structures the information from a folder structure. And then from in there, you can select the file of Revit Now, there's other things that you can do with this. You can do a model coordination view and publish it into Docs so other team members can see that as well. So there's a lot in here from model coordination perspective where you can do light clash detection. And soon to be, I know Artley just pulled up Navisworks. If every team member is already in here, there's really no need to export. And you can just use model coordination, especially with the rules and exclusions they're now publishing into the model coordination portion. So I see in the future, as we were saying earlier, one platform, one location. We're all in here working together to create a product for the client, right? Yeah. That we
In a
turn
dream
over.
scenario, yeah.
Yeah. And then activate Tandem on it, right? And then that's your FM solution. So, okay. That would be the dream. That's like, what was that? There's a movie that's like you're thinking about it in the future, and this is what you would visualize it, and then it actually happens. But we'll see if it happens. Okay. So from here, what I'm going to go through and do is I'm going to go through and select this. So you can click the model open. So what do you have in differences in comparison to the 3D model viewer or 3D PDF viewer? So from here, you are able to go through and model browse. So I can come in here and look at different categories. When you go through and select elements, you get that elemental information as well. So there is information about what you are selecting as well from the metadata of it. You can go to the specific properties of it if you want to as well. So from here, you have the property information assembly. So you get all of this as well when you're looking at specific information as you are selecting it. So we still have that same comparison. The one thing I do like about this would probably be the secondary one. And you can filter things out too, by the way, if you don't want to see everything in here. You can still spin around if you want. So you can go through and spin around the model if you need to. The one thing I do like is the compare versions. This is just from a perspective of me receiving some type of model. If you wanted to go through and compare a different version of a publish, you do have that option to compare these. The reason I like this is that if you get an update or something was published and there's a difference and it wasn't made known to the whole design team, you can be made aware of those differences from this perspective. So that's one thing I do like. Again, that model compare. So you can then exit the comparison here. There's the information was there on the right. The other thing is you can come in here and measure. So if you ever did want to go through and measure, you do have that option as well. So if I wanted to go through and measure from here to here, it's a lot easy, just picks and clicks if I wanted to. So it's showing your X, Y, and the blue one is, I don't even know what axis that would be, but you do have that option to measure directly by selecting information directly in the model. It's a lot easier than I would assume probably like just a single plane, right? Because I can have, it's a 3D plane that just selected from me just by clicking, right? So it understands that. You do have the option to go through and let's see, issues. Well, that would be my next one maybe. I was looking for like a markup, but the issue would be the markup, I would assume. You would want to do that because essentially issues, if you didn't know, you can download the add-in or it's called an extension that allows you to publish issues into your Revit environment. So like if you're in ACC, you're working on an active ACC project, you can have issues that populate into Revit so you can address them. So you're not having to go into this platform to simultaneously address them as you're working within your model. So from here, if I wanted to go through and say, hey, there's a coordination issue. We'll go here. Looks like there's a wall within this wall. So from here, if I wanted to go through and just select that, I can go through and say, hey, there's a coordination issue here. Great. What's the issue? The description, if I wanted to go through and type in a description, who do I want to assign this to as well? So I can go through and assign this to, let's see if you're here, Jason. I believe you are, right?
I don't know if I'm in that one.
You're not.
No.
Okay, so we will go through and assign it to good old Kyle. You all remember Kyle. We should get him back on here soon. So it is assigned to Kyle, and now we can go through and say, hey, when is this due? This is due the 31st. When is your start date? Tomorrow. You don't need to start today. You probably have a bunch of stuff going on. what is the root cause? Constructability. Well, it would be more of a clash, right? So constructability, and then any references. I can add any comments if I wanted to, and we are good. So then you can come over to here to track your issues. So all the issues that are part of this project, you can see all of mine that I've assigned to folks as well. Well, you see the entire project, but you could say, hey, like, who do you specifically want to look at in that information as well? Here's the activity log as well. So you can see like a start date and time, due dates, all the information proposed through that issue tracking. And again, you can have the extension that allows you to plug it into your specific design environment.
Pretty fancy. So obviously this is going to be way more robust, right? Because we're talking about an Autodesk Revit designed model being opened in an Autodesk designed collaboration platform.
Yep.
Through Docs. So it's going to be more robust than taking that Autodesk model into Bluebeam Review, as we showed before. And we're going to go back to Review here in a minute to talk about the call outs and things that you can do over there. But one thing to note is you can see these two yellow circles that are on the model. And as Michael rotates around, you know, he can still quickly go to those things and see what the issues are, right? That's an important comparison because we're going to do something similar in Review. Look at that little helicopter on top. I just noticed that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I forget you're not part of it. I always like to show people you can. It's a lot smoother even through a web app. You can bring, the other thing is the phone app. You can do the same thing with issues and stuff on your phone. So that's pretty cool. You can fly through the 3D model on your phone when you're in the field. That's another value add. So
yeah, that's pretty good. Right, because that's where all this is going, right? We've been talking about construction and what do people have now and what are they dealing with? And you might be on your phone in the back of an Uber on the way to the airport or whatever and being able to do some of this coordination stuff and still be able to function on the job without necessarily having to be in the office behind your computer, taking a look at things. It's going to allow better communication because it's going to enable better communication for everybody, right? So yeah, the software that Michael's in now is not really software; it's a website.
Yeah,
Autodesk Docs.
Yeah, so Autodesk Construction Cloud is the platform that I'm in.
Yeah, we'll have to have a whole other. I know we've talked about it a little bit when Kyle Lee was on here talking about the different modules between Docs and BIM Collaborate Pro and Build. You know, there are different things, but this is something we're seeing a lot more of. Like,
yeah, maybe I can have them come in because I don't know anything about Takeoff. They do all of that from a construction team standpoint on our construction team here. I live and breathe in design collaboration, model coordination, but there's Takeoffs. Like, just do some folks want to maybe look at that from that perspective? But again, it comes down to a deliverable to folks. Like, I know, for instance, Doug, longtime listener, receives PDFs. Like, he can't do a takeoff from in an ACC platform from a PDF perspective. So maybe that conversation could be cool to look at just to see what's out there if you have access. Well, yeah, I think you pay for takeoff. Yeah. So
yeah, well, you know, we're going to be diving more into estimation and stuff with Doug next week, sort of building off of those other things, and maybe in a couple more weeks we'll get somebody to come on here and talk about takeoff. Again, we're not necessarily just showing you Bluebeam things here on MCR. We want to show you things that you might be interacting with either in the future or down the road or working with somebody who is using those things. So if you have zero interest or need to use takeoff, but somebody on your project is using takeoff, it might be beneficial to have a little bit of understanding. And that's what we're going to try to do moving forward is some of these things are just another tool in your tool belt, right?
Yep. So yeah, this is it's included in your AEC collection. To answer David's question, he says, what's the cost for the platform of Autodesk Construction Cloud? So Docs is part of the platform of ACC, and you can get access to what I just did just by having Docs, or you can pay for Docs annually, and I think it's around like $400 or $500 a year, something like that, to get access to Docs. But again, if you're utilizing docs and different methods, you're probably going to need a BIM Collaborate Pro license if you are leveraging a central model. But you can upload a single model into docs if you wanted to. Again, it stores, I don't want to say any file type. I would say any typical FTP site you can store things. The platform is just, there's a lot of things you could do with it in terms of when you start getting into the BIM Collaborate Pro area, you can start integrating your email system. So there's transparency from teams to teams of what's happening, what's transpiring. You can do your transmittals directly in here. There's a lot. So like in terms of where it's going, again, what Autodesk just announced a couple weeks ago was the integration with this platform API and Bluebeam's platform of API. So I will be very happy when things are announced because then they can start connecting. So that'll be interesting on how those are going to connect. Are they going to build something that interoperability in terms of like model to Bluebeam Cloud platform? I don't know, maybe. Or is it going to be back to like, hey, finally we can do sessions on PDFs that are from the ACC environment? Because right now you can upload PDFs or views of sheets into ACC as well. So, you know, there's a lot.
Yeah, it's really an exciting time.
Yeah.
Right.
So what did you have, Jason, that you want to talk about next?
I was going to show, close some of the stuff. So I'll start sharing and go back to mine. So we're talking about, you showed some of the issues and comments in ACC.
Yep.
Now I'm here back in my 3D PDF. Again, came from Navisworks. I can still, and I showed you how to section. We talked about changing the lighting. We talked about, doing some of that manipulation. It's kind of neat. Ew, that's not so neat. We can do a bunch of different things, but we didn't talk about how to do markups with it, right? So earlier in my example, got in here, tried to measure, and I couldn't do that, right? So some tools will work. Now you'll notice we do have this toolbar, the 3D hover bar, that automatically pops up whenever you have a 3D PDF open, but it does not have any markup tools, right? Now, some of these markup tools aren't going to work. Can I create spaces? No, nothing happens. I can click the button, but nothing happens, right? If I go to Cloud Plus, nothing happens. Okay. If I go to Callout, nothing happens. Why is that happening? There it goes. That was weird. Hang on a second. Hold up. We got a little freezy issue here going on.
It's because it locks the V2 though. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's happening is you'll notice my 3D hover bar went away because my view changed from ISO, which it was before, right? And now I have that big blue marker bulb. So that blue marker bulb is similar to that yellow circle that we saw in ACC, right? If I click on that, it's going to take me to a locked view. What does that mean? This is just a 2D still frame image, essentially. But now we can see that markup, right? If I try to scroll or orbit, I can't do that. And up at the top here, this guy always trips me up. There is a close function where if you hit the close window, it will take you back to 3D, and then you can go back to orbiting. But you'll notice that, whoa, come here. That orb is not exactly where that call out was. It's just letting me know that somewhere in that area. So if I put one over here, oh boy, come on, coffee fingers, you can do it. Now keep in mind, I still have this in a section view as well. So I cut the roof off this building, right? So I can come over here and create another markup. Let me try Cloud Plus again. And I'm going to give it some time.
Yeah, let it freeze real quick.
Shouldn't have to, though.
Did you click
There it
it? Yeah,
goes.
there you go. Yeah.
So, and it takes a little bit. So if I want to cloud that railing, well, I picked a terrible view. I'm sorry, everybody.
I know I want to rotate my head.
Right. Again, hit my close, and then down at the bottom, I have those different markup views. Right. Now, what else can I do with this? If I go, I have markup view and I have markup view 1. I can manage those. I can move them back and forth. I can rename them. So I can say railing issue. So it's not exactly the same as creating issues, but it is pretty handy, right? And it jumped me right to that. So I can go through here, and if I name them and spent the time to say what they are, it will make it easier to collaborate with someone. And these will save when you send that 3D PDF to somebody else, right? So pretty darn slick. Again, we're still just here in review, still playing with just a generic model, essentially. So this could be anything. I would love to test it with a file from TBC or some other thing. So Sheldon, if you have a TBC file that you want to send over, I'm happy to play with it and see if I can get it into review using Navisworks as the bridge between them. Otherwise, I don't have TBC natively anymore. So cool. What else would you like to see, everybody? I'm going to stop sharing real quick here because I didn't have my chat.
I was
Oh,
watching it. Yeah.
okay.
They were just talking about some catching up on what the.
Yeah. So, does it create a stand-up markup list? I believe it does. Or does it? Or does it? It does. Yeah. So the markup list does still show up.
But it's it, and then you have the orbs that you can go through and click through. Yeah.
Yep.
But no, we talked about the orbs, and I was making the comment about if you had too many of them up, you'll be out of luck there.
Yeah, and I there might be a setting to change the visibility of those things.
I would assume that they'd probably downsize because if you're scrolling in and out and they're starting to shrink size wise, it'll probably do that when you overload, probably with the amount that's there. But I guess it would just come down to understanding how much information it is,
Right. Now, on that note, so not only did it add markups list,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I went and did a summary, and it went and found those views for me. So that's pretty slick. The markup summary is pretty handy. Now, will it take me to where it is? It will. So I like that a lot. That's a function I don't think I've tested before. So good stuff all around.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a huge change in terms of what workflow you may want to introduce, but it just comes down to what your needs are and what's available, right? So I think if you're looking from an ACC perspective, you do have to have docs access. There's no viewer, so you have to pay to play there. And then going, unless you have an AEC collection. So it's included in that value. So if you want to get the most value out of what you're using, the other one would be that, you have review and people are sending you 3D PDFs. You do have to have the add-in to create the 3D PDFs, either from Navisworks, so you'd have to have access to Navisworks or access to Revit, and those people would have to have access to the add-in. So after that, you can get them sent to you and you can receive them all day. You don't need a specific license type, but hey, think about it. The other way would be like I can get review as a viewer and still view 3D PDFs. So that's another tip.
Now, what if I have Revit and you have Bluebeam Review complete installed and you do not see those 3D or those Bluebeam functionalities inside of Revit? That's because you have to install Bluebeam Review after you have Revit installed, right? So there is some order of operations that you should do. You might have to reinstall it, right? Or does administrator still allow you to plug it in after the fact?
The administrator allows you to plug it in after the fact, but you just decide when it's installed. Typically you just select what version. So like if a new version comes out and you update it, you just select from the administrator what add-in you want. It's like a checkbox. Remember?
Yeah. I have that on mine, but yeah, applications need to be restarted for the plugin to be activated, deactivated. Okay. So I installed Civil 3D 2025, but that doesn't show up as a checkbox because I installed that after review.
Well, I don't think they're out yet for 2024, 2025.
Oh, that could be it too.
Yeah, like check in so Bluebeam add in for design software. There's a list.
It says it's there for 2024, so I'm gonna fire that up real quick. We just have a couple minutes left.
Yeah, there's a list that you can go through and look. Oh, this brings me to like the training page. I don't want the plugins. I just want to see like what is. There's a list out there that I will find for next time that says what like plugins is active, and I don't believe 2025 is out yet.
Probably not, but speaking for Civil 3D, there's not a whole lot of big changes, so it shouldn't take much. Oh, and I did install point layout. Add-ins, output. There it is. It's under. Oh, there is a 3D PDF functionality in Civil 3D. I misspoke. So, real quick, with just a couple minutes left, I'm going to start sharing again. And since Michael was so nice to show you Revit, I'll show you Civil 3D. Here's the test sample file that comes with Civil 3D. And then normally you would go to add-ins to find it, but I went to output, and that's where you have this whole Bluebeam add-in. So here I have create PDF. I have change settings where I can go in and say, do I want to include hyperlinks, custom properties, all those things? Do I want to do my current tab, all model views? We've got some controls there. But in 3D PDF, I can, again, do the U3D or create that 3D PDF. Now, if I create this 3D PDF, I don't think it's going to let me see that surface model, but we're going to find out. And let's put that on, not the desktop, Bluebeam, 3D PDFs. I know I have a folder. We're going to call this Civil 3D test. And we'll see what we get. It does take a couple seconds to load up.
Don't click anything.
Before, right? Do not click anything. You have to be patient here.
We tested it. You had to go to Navisworks, remember?
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, it looks like it loaded something, but
it loaded, but there's nothing
that's
here.
nothing there. Yeah.
So that functionality just doesn't really work. Yeah, we tested this before, and that's why we ended up just going to Navisworks to open it there, because that can natively view it in 3D. Now, if I go back to Civil, would it make a difference if I had this set up to not be in a 2D view? If it was in a 3D view, and I had this set up, isometrically, would that make a difference? Maybe, where I'd be able to see that model here. I got to test it, and I'll get back to you. Make sure that's closed.
Yeah. Insert Jeopardy theme here.
Right.
If only the year was the actual year for all Autodesk stuff. Silly, yeah. I wish they would just do what Bluebeam did for their versions. Just publish updates to it, so there's no need to reinstall. Just publish updates to whatever Revit, because we're already updating it anyways. When the newest version comes out, there's already like 10 updates for it, right? Like just one version that we update that current version. You're maintaining the state of one install. Maybe it's too complex. I don't know. I'm just saying.
It's a whole other story, but I can't answer that. So that said, that brings our time for today. Happy last episode of May. We will see you next week, June 4th, with Doug McLean. Sorry, too many names going on here.
Whoa.
Getting everybody confused. Doug's going to come in and jump, and we're going to get real deep into washing the data. I believe that's a term that you used that comes from review and other things in order to get it into other platforms. So it's going to be really interesting. Make sure you tune in for that. We will see you all next week. Take care out there and see you next time.
Yep. See you next time.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and check out some of the other content on our channel.